Well, it's becoming more common for people under 50 to be diagnosed with colon or rectal cancer. According to the American Cancer Society, rates increased by more than 2% per year between 2012 and 2021.
Marty Salt puts your family first by answering the question of whether everyday choices play a role.
It affects people from all walks of life.
It's not just a disease of the old, it's not just a disease of the obese or overweight people.
But in the Western world, colorectal cancer, which develops in the colon or rectum, is on the rise, specifically among people under 50.
We found that since the 90s, there's been a steady and alarming rise in young people with colorectal cancer.
There are many theories as to why.
The environment, to genetics.
Now, studies out of Australia reveal that healthy eating may help reduce incidence of colon cancer. Diets rich in fruits, vegetables such as dark greens, whole grains, and healthy fats, while limiting sugar and alcohol, significantly reduce cancer risk and improve health outcomes.
There's a lot of evidence also supporting that obesity and sedentary lifestyle are associated with a higher risk for colorectal cancer.
While there's likely no one food to blame, physicians say diets high in red meat and alcohol are associated with an increased risk of colon cancer.
The Australian researchers found high-fiber foods help reduce inflammation, but eating non-whole grains and sugar with those fibrous foods actually wipe out the positive benefits. But when it comes to why more young people are being diagnosed with colorectal cancer,
the truth is we don't know the full answer.
The evidence does show that diet changes can help prevent the disease in all ages. Marty Salt, WGEM News.